Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Devon Franklin. Devon is an award-winning film and TV producer, New York Times best-selling author, international speaker, and spiritual success coach. Well, he joins us this morning to talk about his latest release, The Truth About Men, What Men and Women Need to Know. Devon, good morning and welcome back.
Hey, good morning. Good morning. So glad to be back.
It's good to have you back. I said to you before we started, this book makes you mad, it makes you sad, and then at the end, I think you can sort of feel glad. So let's go ahead and take the deep dive.
Okay, let's do it.
The first thing you talk about is the metaphor you use of men being dogs. And you wrote this, and I thought it was really interesting. A little bit later in the book, you write, there's an internal war going on in every man between the master and the dog. Let's talk about that analogy.
Sure. And I want to be clear, in the introduction, I say men are not dogs. I think that's a really important distinction. And however, I use this dog training metaphor as a metaphor, an analogy to help us understand the challenges we face relative to lust and what we can do about it. And so I do use this idea that there is this internal war, this struggle between love and lust within every man, between the master, that's what I call love, and the dog, that's what I call lust. Now, lust is a selfish impulse for personal, professional, financial, or sexual fulfillment by any means necessary, even if those means are detrimental. Lust is very selfish. It wants what it wants, whenever it wants it, however it wants it. However, love is more powerful. Love of self, love of God, love of the woman in our life, love of family, love of community. Love is selfless. So when we as men, the way that we win this war is by putting love in control of lust, by putting selflessness over selfishness, by putting sacrifice over our desire just to please ourselves at all costs. And when we as men can do that, then we can actually become the men we want to be. That's when we can honor our commitments. That's when we can live with integrity. But when we acquiesce, that's how we lose the war. When we give ourselves over to that lust. And that lust is more than, just for women or sex. It's also for money, for power, for success, to the point where we do anything to achieve those things at the expense of sometimes our reputation and our character. If we don't put love over lust, we can never become the men we were called to be.
So that's absolutely on point and true. But as you write very early in the book, as a 9-year-old boy, sort of not seeing what a man should be, looking at manhood through the lens of your father and other men, how now do you begin to change the thought process all the way back from little boyhood of almost every little boy that has never really understood what being a man and choosing love over lust looks like?
Yeah, so often, even when we don't have the right model, we can learn a lot from seeing it done the wrong way. So I think that it's important because sometimes there's a tendency to rationalize behavior that we should really challenge because we say, well, I never had an example of a father, so, I'm just going to continue to behave that way. Well, to me, my father died when I was 9 years old. I never had a model of manhood. However, I did see other men in my life not always handle manhood the right way. I also saw the pain in the eyes of so many women in my family that was the result of so many of their dealings with men. So I think as men, it's important to sometimes acknowledge, well, I didn't have the best model, but I did have a model of who I don't want to be. I did have a model of what I don't want to do. And sometimes those can be as strong to push us in the right direction as sometimes having the appropriate model. So for me, I just got to the point where I was like, okay, I recognize that I have love and lust in me too. I have the master and the dog, yet I still want to make the decision about who I really want to be. And so that requires me to get discipline and self-control and navigate this struggle so that even without, necessarily a father or, father model growing up, I still have to decide this is still a man I want to be. The man I want to be honors commitment, definitely has integrity in front of people and when I'm not with people. And so that at the end of the day, each one of us, every man has to make the decision of who they want to be, what we want to do, and what's the type of legacy we want to leave for those, even if the legacy we come from is less than what we would have hoped.
When did you get there Because you are a man now with lots of power and lots of opportunity. When did you get there?
Well, I think for me, it's just more of a mentality, and I think we're all on a journey. So, I certainly have not mastered the dog within. I work on mastering it every day. And for me, in terms of when I got there, I feel like because I had a front row seat to so much pain in the women, in my mother's eyes, and the women of my family, their eyes, that so many men had caused them, I had a desire to try to figure this out very early in my life. Because I just did not want to see the people that I loved in so much pain. And so for me, I'm like, okay, well, what's going on? Why can we as men be faithful? Is it just in our nature to cheat? Why is there so much infidelity? Why can we never be satisfied? Why do we buy into more is more? These were the questions that I wrestled with even as a teenager, and then growing into adulthood and growing into manhood. As I started finding myself even in dating, subscribing to these ideas. Oh, well, the more women I have, the better. The more money I have, the better. The position that I have at the job, oh man, that's going to fulfill me. As I started doing those things, I realized they just weren't true. Just not true. The more women I had as a single man didn't make me feel better. If anything, it was more stressful. I thought there were times when I would get a certain position and make a certain amount of money, it would make me happy. It didn't. And so I think a series of events and being on this journey helped me get to the place where I realized, okay, I have to do my work. I have to navigate, this struggle within. And I also have to work on finding peace within. Because anytime as we as men try to find peace outside of ourselves, we usually don't succeed. Because it's got to start internally. It's got to start with the person that looks back at us in the mirror and liking and loving that person.
Mm-hmm. And when did you realize, after you had all of the things, all of the trappings that can be denoted as success, that something was missing?
I think it was just, in the process, as I was just living and exploring what it means to be a man. I think in the process of doing these things, in the process of dating, in the process of dating multiple women, where I was like, man, this isn't all it's cracked up to be. And again, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a single man and trying to find the right woman. I think that's natural and that's okay. But I think when it goes beyond trying to find the right woman and having multiple women just for the sake of multiple women and not being honest with those women, I think that's where we can veer into territory where we're feeding the lust within, not the love within. And so as I was going through that journey myself as a young man, I just came to the revelation, this is not working. And there was a vision that I had one day where I was at my wedding, and the minister said, turn around, and down the center aisle were all the women that I dated, but they were cut open.
Wow.
Down the middle aisle. And God basically said, did it take all of them to get here? Mm-hmm. And he basically said, don't play with my daughter's hearts. And that was a very convicting moment for me to say, hey, I got to start doing my work. I got to start being intentional. Doesn't mean I'm going to be perfect, but I got to at least start being honest with the people I'm dating and not just lead them on or manipulate them for my own pleasure.
Wow. Let's get a break here, Devon. But when we come back, we'll talk more about the truth about men. Stay on point. We're back after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Devon Franklin. He's a New York Times best-selling author, and he has many other incredible jobs. But one of the things that he does is he writes books that really make us think, like the book we're talking about this morning, The Truth About Men, What Men and Women Need to Know. Did you feel like, in many respects, Devon, when you started writing this book and you started really being open about yourself and about things that happen with men on this journey, did you feel like maybe you were giving away the G code?
Oh, no, I didn't feel that way, because the reality is all these secrets is what has got us in this trouble to begin with. So, and also the book definitely doesn't vilify or villainize men, especially the men that have read the book so far. They have said, wow, thank you. Mm-hmm. We needed this, because there's so much fatherlessness, especially in communities of color.
Absolutely.
There's very few men teaching other men how to become men. So when men read this book, they don't feel like I'm giving away secrets. They're saying, thank you. Thank you for helping us.
So was it like taking the shield off of a secret or secrets that have been in communities and in men's lives forever? Was it like sort of a cathartic moment where we say, look, this is who we were and this is what we did, but this is not who we have to be?
Exactly. This is who we have been conditioned to be, but here's how we do it differently. And in this book, I put so much information also for women so that you give them understanding of us as men, because I don't think you can be successful in dealing with us if you don't really understand us, why we think a certain way, why we behave a certain way. That's not to justify that behavior. That's just to have information to help you better navigate your dealings with men. And for us as men, for other men that read this book, they say it helps transform them, because a lot of times as men, we feel certain things, but we don't always have the vocabulary to articulate, well, what's really going on? And I think this book, through this mastering the dog and this, dog training metaphor, it helps create a framework to say, oh, right, this is exactly how it feels when the dog starts to bark, or this is how it feels when lust starts to go crazy within me. Here's how I navigate that. And so the response has been overwhelming, that so many people that have read the book so far, and it's just been out, the book just came out a week ago, to just see the response that it's having and the hearts and minds that it's changing already. And I think that there is hope, and we don't have to just, fall prey to our urges, and we don't have to just become the sum total of our urges. We actually can do better if we choose better.
Absolutely. And don't you think once you start to tell on those urges, whatever they are, that's the beginning?
Well, without a doubt, because anything we suppress, we empower. And suppressed urges persist. They don't go away. So when we tell the truth, when we're transparent, when we admit that we're struggling, we don't have it all together, when we admit we have an urge, what happens, I believe, is that when you feel the urge, but you don't act on it, it helps take its power away. So often, urges become stronger because they're kept quiet. And anything we try to press down, it ultimately is going to come out not only much bigger, but usually in a more destructive way. So the more we're just in touch with ourselves and say, I'm having this feeling I shouldn't have. I'm having this thought I know I shouldn't have. Let me talk to somebody about that. Let me talk to a friend. Let me talk to the person I'm with so that I can get the help I need, instead of keeping it in, letting it grow. And then usually what will happen, we will find a way to act on it in one of the most devastating ways possible, because it's the same way you get hungry. When you get hungry and we're impulsive, we just reach for whatever's close, no matter if it's good for us or not. We just want to satisfy the hunger. Sometimes our urges can be similar, so we have to learn discipline and self-control, and to know that just because we feel it, we don't have to act on it.
Right, and though you use the metaphor of the dog and mastery, I think it's really important for this conversation in this book that you talk about being able to master one's highest self.
Yes, that's what it's all about. The book is, at the end of the day, the book is about how to alleviate pain and how to love. And love is the most powerful force in the universe. And when we can become masters, it means that we master love. It means that we lead with other people's thoughts and hearts and minds as our priority before our own. And this idea of mastery is something that we work on every day. It's something that's a lifelong process, but it's a good process, because when we as men, especially, learn how to love, there's nothing we can't do. And so much of that learning how to love is, first of all, learning to love the man that looks back in the mirror. Now, most men deal with a lot of brokenness because we don't really fit the society's idea of a man. And as a result, most of us growing up, if we don't fit society's idea, we were met with violence. Stop crying. What's wrong with you? Don't be a wimp. So what do? We suppress. We don't communicate just to survive. So I do believe when we begin to love, when we learn mastery, it helps us reprogram the conditioning, where we realize our strength is found in communication. Where there is, transparency, there's transformation. And when we as men do that, we can transform into something we never thought possible.
And one of the things that you wrote in the book was that you yourself had a hard time growing up and understanding how to love yourself.
Yes.
Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I was raised middle child of 3 boys, and for the majority of my life, especially in school, people would be like, oh, you're an L7, you're a square, you don't goody two-shoes, you don't smoke, you don't drink, you don't curse, you don't do all these things. So a lot of the times I really didn't love myself. And my self-esteem, even though I was doing well in school, my self-esteem was low. And it wasn't until I got much older where I began to realize the same things that people talk about me for were the very things that were essential to my success and essential to who I am. And so as I began to embrace who I am and begin to love who looks back in the mirror, that's when life started to happen in a positive way for me. And I started to just embrace, this is who I am. And I love that about myself. I'm not wired like anybody else. I'm not looking to anyone else to find validation. I'm looking in the mirror and I'm looking up to find validation. And as I started doing that and learning to love myself, it helped me love others better. It has helped me love my wife better. And it's helped me begin the process of mastery and putting that love in control of that lust.
Do you think that you wrote early in the book that your dad was an alcoholic? He died early. Do you think that his life and what you understood about his life made you make that decision early that that's not the man that you wanted to be or pattern yourself after?
Without a doubt. I mean, when your father dies of a heart attack at 36 and most of my memories of him when he was alive, he was drunk. And it was very, very traumatic, and it was very chaotic those times when he'd be in the house, and that's the state of mind that he was in. It does do something to you to make you say, hey, either you become that or you do everything in your power not to become it. And so me and my brothers, my older brother, my younger brother, to this day, none of us drink. It's just not what we do. We want to break the cycle. We want to break the curse. We want to, because not only was my father an alcoholic, but his brothers were alcoholics. His father and his mother were alcoholics. So this goes deep into our family, and we just wanted to break the cycle. So you're right, that exposure, that early, really helped make a decision for us about who we really wanted to be and what we didn't want to be.
And so do you think y'all collectively came together? Because at that point in your life, you don't really necessarily know about generational curses, I don't guess, but you understand that there is something happening within your family that affects all men. How do you guys come together and say, you know what, we're not going to be this?
Well, we didn't come together. This was an individual decision. There was never a collective decision about this is what we're going to do. Even to this day, I'm 40 years old. My older brother's 43. My younger brother's 37. I don't think we've ever had a conversation that this was we just all were experiencing the same thing. And it was so traumatic that it impacted us in the same way, where we were just like, nope, it's not who we want to be. We don't want to cause this type of pain to our wives. We saw what my mother had to go through. We saw what we had to go through. And, as much as we loved our father, it was definitely hard. It was difficult because you just never knew, what state of mind he was going to be in. And that was when you have a lot of instability as a child, that can really produce so many negative things in your life. And so I think for all of us, you're right, we weren't necessarily aware of like, okay, we're going to break the curse or break the cycle. I think as we got older, we realized that by not drinking, it was a way to do that. But in the moment, we all just said, we don't want to become this. We want the good parts of our father, but this part, this alcoholic part, we don't want this. So what do we have to do? Let's not drink to begin with. Wow. Let's not be afraid of it. There's no fear there.
Right.
But we're making a choice that's just not what we want to do. So even now, 40 years old, I've never had a drink. I don't intend to drink. It's not something that I really think that much about because I see the destruction that it almost did in my family in terms of taking us all out. And I think all of us just made the decision individually that that's not what we want.
Amazing. Let's get a quick break here. When we come back, we're going to talk about the church's role in talking about lust and where should the church fall in that respect. Stay on point. We're back with more of our conversation with Devon Franklin after this. Welcome back, everybody, to the OPT Network. Our guest this morning is Devon Franklin, and we're talking about his new book, The Truth About Men, What Men and Women Need to Know. And I think you're right on point. It's not just about men. It's about what women need to know. And it's really, I said this to you in the beginning, sometimes the truth hurts because nobody really wants to deal with infidelity or a man in their life that deals with lust, because every woman wants to believe that she's the only one. But I think it's not unless and until we put the truth of a thing out there that we'll truly be able to see change.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, while these truths are not easy to admit and probably not even easy to accept, they are the truths that will transform us to become better, especially in a relationship, especially in a marriage. A lot of times we don't always talk. We don't always tell the other person what we're really thinking, what we're feeling,
right.
What is true, what isn't true. And then how can we expect things to always work out well when we aren't even vocalizing what we really feel. We're not communicating. So my hope through writing this book is to actually produce hope that there's something we can do about it. Here's how we do it. Here's how we have more sensitivity to each other's issues. Here's how we love but not judge. Here's how we communicate but not chastise. All of these things are so important to get back to health in our relationships, so that we as men and women can feel supported to become all that we really can be.
Right. And I think that there is a lot of work that has to be done in relationships so that partners can begin to trust each other, so that they can say, I'm having these feelings, or be open and honest, and not, as you said, be chastised or be condemned for being open and honest.
Yes, I have a whole chapter in the book called Create a Safe Space, where we have to have a safe space where we can talk. And one of the rules of a safe space is no judgment. You cannot judge the other person for the truth that they share. Now, sometimes that's really hard, especially in a relationship sense. Sometimes, women have come to me and they say they want their man to tell the truth. The man tells the truth, and then the woman gets mad at him. It's like, well, you can't do that. You may not agree with his truth. You may not know how to handle it, but when he is expressing his truth, create an environment where if you don't know how to respond, it's better to not say anything, to take it in and say, you know what? Let me go think about this. I hear what you're saying. I'm going to come back to you when I'm ready to process. And vice versa. As men, when the woman in our life tells us the truth, we have to learn to take it too. Not get mad at her, not make her feel less than for telling us the reality of what's really going on. And sometimes we don't want the reality of what's going on. We want to live in a fictional or fantasized version of what it is because we're afraid that if we get the truth, we really won't be able to cope. But I really do believe that the truth is what sets us free. It really is the thing that liberates us. And whenever we can feel truthful, we can feel that we can become everything we really want to be.
Absolutely. And I think that's the measure of any relationship is openness and honesty.
Yes, I totally agree. And that honesty is essential.
It is. And it oftentimes it does hurt. But I think that that's where you begin to build on the relationship. And that's how you grow. But one of the things that you write about in the book, and I thought was really important, you talk about the church's role in not really doing a good job on talking about lust.
No, I mean, we live in I was raised in the church, and I love the church and still go to church, and the church is amazing. So I'm not anti-church by any stretch.
Not at all.
However, the church sometimes fosters a culture of suppression. Suppression of feelings, suppression of ideas, suppression of urges. And at the end of the day, we have to start being honest that we are spirit and flesh, and that sometimes the flesh wants things that go against the spirit. And sometimes it's not enough just to tell somebody, don't do it. Sometimes it's not enough just to say, oh, don't talk about it. Just give it to Jesus. Well, sometimes we give things to Jesus. Jesus says, I'm going to give it back to you. Look at the story of Paul. Paul had a thorn, he said, in his side. He asked 3 times, take it away. And God said, my grace is sufficient for you. So it's important, especially in communities of faith, to start talking, to start being honest, to start talking about solutions. How do we deal with this? Because too often we end up not helping people because we don't want to talk about the things that are really destroying us and that people are struggling with. So I wanted to write this book to not only help men and women, but to also say, especially in communities of faith, we got to start telling the truth. We got to start being honest. We got to start helping people. It's not enough just to say don't do. We have to also point the way on how not to do and why not to do. So my hope is that this book, especially from the response I've already gotten from men and women around the world that have read this book, especially men and women of faith, they have told me that this book is transformative for them because it finally is giving them an outlet to express things that they never thought they could or never knew how, or at least they're reading something that is exactly what they're going through. And to me, that is the beginning of incredible change that we really need right now.
And one of those things that you write about in the book is pornography. And so many men especially are having issues with pornography and dealing with the shame of that and being unable to tell the truth and being unable to break free from that.
Yes. And I put in the book, I talk about that in the book. And I also think that any man that reads those portions of the book, will find hope in the midst of what may feel like a hopeless situation. And in that hope will be strength to not allow the dog within to run and ruin their life, but to empower the master to overcome strongholds that currently may seem insurmountable.
Absolutely. And then you write, the main ingredient in the soul food is virtue.
Yes.
And you also talk about the dog and the vice. Let's talk about those two.
Yes. I believe that vice is dog food. I believe that virtue is soul food, and the one that we feed will ultimately become the strongest. And so in order for us to be the men we were called to be, we have to feed ourselves virtue. We have to focus on what's good. We have to resist the temptation to engage and indulge in vice, because vice only makes the dog stronger. And when the dog is stronger than the master, we will find ourselves doing what it wants instead of what we really, really want to do. That's why I focus on soul food. What are the things that edify our soul? What are the things that improve our mind? What are the things that make us whole? Those are the things, the virtuous things, that we have to consistently and constantly put ourselves in a pattern of consuming, so that we can strengthen the master, we can strengthen the love within. And when love is in control, and when we lead with love, there's nothing we can't do in a positive way.
Absolutely. And I think that that's no more important than this time that we're living in the Me Too movement, where we're seeing so many people have allowed their vices to be fed and have lorded over people that didn't have the power that they had. And now we're seeing men that seem to be men of integrity, being now exposed for feeding those vices.
Yeah, I mean, listen, that's one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book. And I also put information, in the book about the Me Too movement, the Time's Up movement. I also clarify that they're not based on gotcha movements.
Right.
Me Too was started, over a decade ago by Tarana Burke, and she just wanted to create something for women of color who had been abused to have an outlet to talk about their abuse. And it wasn't until the Harvey Weinstein incident where the Me Too movement really took off, but it predates that the Harvey Weinstein incident by at least 10 years. And I do think it's so important to be able to talk about these things, to be able to put information out there, because, with information there is power. And a lot of times we lack the information, and as a result, we lack the power. Mm-hmm. So I wanted to put this information out there so that we as men and women can come together, that we can understand one another better, and we can actually do better from that understanding. Because when we are at odds with one another, when we operate as if we're out to get one another, we can never get the best out of each other. And that's why I go back to our responsibility as men. We have to decide who we want to be. We have to look in the mirror and make a decision about the type of man we want to be. Mm-hmm. And real love is leadership. Real mastery is leadership. And when we decide we're going to be a leader of self first, and we're going to lead ourselves with discipline and self-control, there's nothing we really can't do in a positive way.
Sure. So before you've got to go, I'm sure you've contemplated this, especially being in Hollywood. All of the men that are now being exposed, for those men that have not yet been exposed, but know that they took advantage of another human being. As we talk about mastery, and for those men or those people that would read your book, how do you help them to be open and honest and say, this is what I did, but this is not who I am or who I want to be?
Yeah, I have the Master's Pledge that I've written on page 128 of the book. And it's all about making the commitment about the man you want to be. And if you're a man that has, that's been guilty of letting the dog run wild, mm-hmm. It's important to be accountable and responsible for that. Whoever you need to make peace with, I would encourage you to do it, no matter how difficult it may be, and make the decision today that you will take the Master's Pledge, that you will become the man that you really know you can be. Even though it's challenging, even though it's a struggle, it's worthwhile. You can right your wrongs in some instances. And it's important to not just turn a blind eye to what you've done. It's important to make peace with it, to go seek forgiveness, to apologize, and to put yourself in a situation where you make a commitment and a committee of one that you will never do those type of things again to anyone in the present or the future.
There you go. The book is The Truth About Men, What Men and Women Need to Know. Devon, tell people how they can get the book, and most importantly, how they can connect with all of the things that you're doing.
Yes, you can get the book. You can go to my website, devonfranklin.com/the truth. You can also find me on Instagram and Twitter at Devon Franklin, DEVON Franklin. And I'm also on Facebook at Devon Franklin Official. So please come find me. I post a lot of inspirational things throughout the week. I'm also giving people relationship advice, career advice, and just trying to help as much as I can with the platform that God has given me.
Indeed. Devon, thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you for your heart for men, women, and relationships.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about my heart for men, women, and relationships. It's always good to see you.
Indeed. Same here. Hey, everybody, stay on point. We're back after this.